Welcome everyone to the Tuesday Children Getting Your Foot in the Door seminar. John Egan and I are co-presenting together today. I will just tell you a little bit about myself. I am in human resources. I run HR for a financial services technology firm called Tradeweb Markets. I've been there for 5 years. I've been in HR more years than I'm going to share on this call because I've been told that I don't look that old, but I've been doing this for a long time. John and I have presented this program before, but we have not presented it this way. So this is the first for us, given the circumstances. I just want to start off by saying that these are obviously unique times for everybody. I hope you and your families are well, and I'm glad you had a chance to still participate in one of our Tuesday Children programs because we're testing out and trying programs like this to see how they work. And we appreciate your feedback and your questions at the end. And we're going to go through this presentation, talk through the things that we think are important to you from a career perspective, and you may be at different points in your career, which is fine. And then if there's any questions at the end, we'll stop and be able to answer as many as we can to give you any specific feedback about things that you're interested in hearing. So, John, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Fred. My name is Jonathan Egan. I am a property and casualty commercial insurance broker. I was a recruiter for years. I also am a Tuesday's child. I lost my father and my aunt in 9/11. And been working with TC for years, and there's a great group of people. And I think one of the important points I'd like to get across is take advantage of the resources, these programs, all types of things that TC offers, and the people that are around it. Don't be bashful. There's a lot of good people that you can network with, learn from, and I'd certainly help in any way I can. Fred's the HR genius and brain, so he's going to have most of the value add, but just kind of being a young professional, or fairly young. I'm 37 years young tomorrow. Actually, it's my birthday. But I started off on the trading desk, and then I went to a startup company, and then I went to grad school, and then I became a recruiter, and then I've been in insurance, commercial insurance, the last 5 years. So you never know which way your paths are going to go. The first job, the second job, the third job, I couldn't have predicted a lot of it. And it's all a learning process. It's all growing process. Take advantage of every conversation you have and everyone you talk to. Try to learn from it, try to benefit from it. And at any time, feel free to reach out to me directly, and love to chat and help out however I can.
So we're going to talk a little bit today about things that are largely my experience and my opinion, and John's experience and his opinion, in terms of things that you should be focusing on. If you're in the midst of a job search, if you've been working already and looking for a different type of job, or it's your first time looking for a job out of college, I think these things are important. I think that, for the most part, when you're thinking about an interview, and we're going to talk about traditional interviews mostly today, we'll talk a little bit about virtual interviews in one of these slides, but the thing that you want to focus on is making sure you're prepared and recognizing that there are things that you should be focused on as a person that the organization is going to look at evaluating you. Small things matter, and then breathing, which sounds like a pretty obvious, silly thing to be thinking about, is an important part of any interview process, especially if there's nerves involved. So just keep that in mind as something that you're going through an interview process. And that's something that you should always keep in mind as you're sitting in the waiting room, as you're thinking about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. Making sure that you're practicing mindfulness and breathing is important too. So, John, you want to cover this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Fred. So I think one of the most important things to keep in mind and points I like to make to anyone I speak to. I mean, I talk to people who are at any age and have been doing whatever their career is, or whatever the different careers have been, who are looking to make moves or just progressing through their career, is, you know, it's a long process, right? I mean, we've got many years of work, and I think the most important thing you got to do is stay positive, because it's so easy to get bogged down by sending your resume out to 100 different places, maybe going on a bunch of interviews, and if you don't get a response, or you don't get the call back, or you don't get the job offer, I think it's very easy for people to get in their own heads and think it's something that they did wrong, or they're not good enough, or whatever it may be. And I do think it's important to learn from every interview, every conversation, and try to get better, try to improve, but know that especially in this market, especially the way the job environment's been for the last 10 years, it's not easy. And so as soon as you know that, as soon as you identify that it's going to take time, you're going to run up against a lot of walls, you're not going to get every job offer, on every interview, or every, that you go on, you're able to deal with it more. You're able to roll with the punches. And if you know that, and you can, understand that, and, stay positive, because, it's easy to go to 1, 2, 3 interviews and be all pumped up, but to go on, 20 interviews and keep the same level of enthusiasm, the same level of excitement, motivation, it's not easy to do, but you got to do it, and if you understand that, you understand the market, you understand that, not every job interview, not every place you send your resume is going to necessarily be the right fit, and that's okay. Learn from it. Don't beat yourself up. Don't, overthink, the credentials or feedback or whatever it says that maybe you have or you don't have. Take every opportunity as a learning experience. Be thoughtful, focus your energy and your efforts in a positive direction, and know that it's going to happen, and it's going to take time. I'm in sales. I've always been in sales, and it's a volume game. If I call 50 people and I don't get any sales done, I can't be upset. I can't beat myself up, because the 51st call or the 78th call could be the one that is the right one, is the right opportunity. And keeping that momentum, keeping that enthusiasm, keeping that positivity, throughout that entire process and through each conversation, and not putting too much pressure on the people I'm speaking to, not putting too much pressure on myself, is important, because you also don't know what the future holds. And you may meet someone, you may speak to someone, you may interview for a job, and you don't get the call back, you don't get the job offer, but 5 years down the road, you reconnect with that person or that company, and they're hiring in a different group or something. You just never know. And I'll tell you what, everything is a long-term process. And I think that the more you're able to, keep all that in mind, and like I said, easier said than done, but do it. It's gonna make your life a lot less stressful. And you're gonna be able to sleep better at night. And when the right opportunity comes, you're gonna feel good about it, and it's gonna feel different. You're gonna be like, all right, it's like dating. You date 10 people, and you're like, all right, well, shit, maybe it's just never gonna happen. And then you meet someone, on the 11th date, and you're like, oh, okay, this was right. Like, those weren't right. Like, and I was beating myself up because it wasn't happening. And then when it does happen, you feel it. You feel the difference, and you feel the fit. So stay positive, and cast a net, and know that it's going to take a lot of resumes getting out there. It's going to take a lot of phone calls. Be your own recruiter. Talk to as many people. And know that it is a full-time job, and it's not gratifying, because you're not getting necessarily a paycheck for looking for a job, or going on interviews. But that's part of the process to get where you eventually will fit, and will be happy, and will have opportunity. So just keep going, keep moving, and hit that volume. And the more you do, and the more calls, and the more interviews, and the more resumes out, the more opportunities, the more deals done, the more offers. So go get them.
So I mentioned this before as part of the overview. I get made fun of at work because I feel like you can get the answer to most anything today on Google, which is, pick your search engine of choice. When you're going to interview for a job or you're going to apply for a job and you're looking through and you're going through the websites and trying to figure out what makes sense for you based off your interests, making sure that you're prepared and that you know the answers to the questions they're going to ask you beforehand is very important. Most companies today are going to ask you, how much do you know about us? How much do you know about our company, what we do, where we're located, what our strategy is, any news that happened about the company in the recent past. You can get all this information for free, right? Years ago, before the internet, none of this stuff was easy to get, right? Now, it's expected that everybody has the ability to get information and to understand some of the basics about the places that you're applying. If you don't do that beforehand, right, you don't take that opportunity to use that free information, right off the bat, you're at a disadvantage, right? So make sure that you have the basics down, right? And when I say the basics down, try not to only be able to repeat the first 3 lines of the website, right? It doesn't take long for somebody to ask you a second question to figure out whether you just memorized what you read or you actually understood it and you know what it is. It's important for you to understand and get an appreciation for what the company does and show how you're interested in the company and you're doing something about it to put yourself ahead of the game. The other reason why that's important is because you want to make sure that that gives you the best chance to be confident walking into the conversation, right? That confidence comes from you understanding and knowing the job you put in for, why you're there, what the company does, and why you feel like it's a match for you, right? So the things that you want to be aware of are the things you can control. When you're in an interview process, there are certain things you can control. You being prepared is one of those things. If you can go to the next slide. Things you can do to prepare. Write out the answers to sample questions, right? Like, know that they're going to ask you what you're good at. Know that they're going to ask you what you need to work on. Know that they're going to ask you why you think you're a fit for this job. Know that they're going to ask you what types of things would people say about you, right? Or what types of qualities do you think people would find to be things that you are the most capable of doing in the role, right? You all have another extraordinary, which is obviously even more relevant now in the last few weeks than ever before. You have the ability to practice using your phone, okay? Videotape yourself, videotape your answers. I used to say, and this is an indication of how old I am, to do it in front of the mirror. You don't need to do it in front of the mirror anymore. All you need to do is look at yourself on your computer screen, on your iPad, on your phone, and practice, okay? It doesn't matter that you do it 20 times. There's a good chance that you get there in the room and you get nervous and you might stumble over a word. You might not say something exactly the way that you wanted to say. But the point is that you have the ability, at least up front, to give yourself some idea of what's going to come out of your mouth. And the more you say it, the more it becomes a part of who you are, the more you're prepared to say it, and it just becomes easier for you to understand that, you know, knowing your stuff and the things you can control is going to help you. There are websites out there today, LinkedIn, which is a great partner of Tuesday's Children, and Glassdoor, that give you information about the company that you're applying for. It's free information. It's free to sign up. If you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you should. If you need help with a LinkedIn profile, I can help you. The point is that those are the ways that people find out information about you. And it's also the way for you to find out about the people that are in the company. You're going to get a name of the person you're going to interview with, if most companies are the same. You should know who that person is. You should know what job they're in, how long they've been there, where they went to school, anything special about their background. And the reason you want to know that information is because you're looking to make some sort of connection, right? People assume that because I went to St. John's that I like basketball. I like basketball. I don't love basketball. I don't particularly love St. John's basketball because they haven't been good in 25 years. But the people who do their homework and look at my LinkedIn know that I went to St. John's and say, hey, how do you feel about the Johnnies this year? You think they're going to be able to make it? You think you're going to do well? And what they're doing in that instance is they're developing some sort of relatability with me that's outside of the norm that makes them stand out. Okay? So Glassdoor does reviews similar to like reviews you would get about a restaurant. Okay? It's literally a free opportunity for you to hear what the people of the company are saying about the company, right? Similar to if you're going in and you're looking and trying to figure out where you're going to go for dinner, whether you use Google reviews, you use Open Table, whatever it is, you're going to find out about what people are saying about the company, right? TripAdvisor, what's that hotel like? What's it like, going to the city and going on a tour? The same thing is available to you on Glassdoor for companies and jobs. As somebody who runs HR for a company that has to deal with Glassdoor, just keep one thing in mind, right? It's impossible to get 5 out of 5 stars, right? You want to get as many good stars as possible. Obviously, you try to do what you can to get people to get good reviews for you, just like the Italian restaurant you go to, okay? You should try to get a flavor, an understanding of what people feel about the company. What's positive, what's good, what people are saying. Without a doubt, there's always one, just like the Italian restaurant owner who always has one person that had a bad piece of chicken parm. And they run right to the review site and say, I can't believe that was a horrible, tough piece of meat, blah, 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 blah. Try to focus on the overall reviews of the employee of the company. Don't focus so much on the one negative review because there's always going to be one. The last thing about LinkedIn from a preparation standpoint is look into other people who are in the job that you're applying for. So you're applying to be a sales representative. You're applying to be an operations analyst. Look and see who's in that job there and find out, A, do you know anybody? Is there anybody you have any kind of connection to? And B, do these people look like they have the same experience you do? Does this job fit into the profile of what you're looking for? And if you can answer those questions for yourself going in and have that information, you're going to be in a much better place. We're going to move on to the next section, which is talking about networking, and John's going to spend a minute talking about that.
So right here, you've got, myself and Fred, who are both have large networks, and, you should connect with both of us on LinkedIn. You should engage with both of us and because we're willing to help. And part of networking is, finding people who are willing to take the time to talk to you, to network, to make introductions. So you got a head start with us who are willing and capable of helping. People, as Fred was saying about LinkedIn, doing the research and figuring out, okay, I went to Boston College. So if I'm looking to interview or I'm looking to network with a certain company or individual, I'll often see, okay, who at this place went to Boston College? Who at this place is involved with charities? Who at this place, likes basketball? Because a lot of this information is available on LinkedIn and people put this stuff and, they'll maybe have an interest of different, risk management or something that, either wrote a paper or, posted a link or a site of something that, someone that, you're interested in, you like, and you can relate to. And, again, going to what I was saying before is, casting a net and, trying to get as much information you can on, on people and the, understanding the companies you're looking at, where you can connect, as Fred was saying, as far as, is there someone there from St. John's or Boston College? Really using those resources, reach out to those people. I think you'd be surprised how often, if there's an alumni, or even if you just approach someone, in the right way on LinkedIn, hey, you don't want to go and just send, a LinkedIn message or something being like, hey, I'm looking for a job, can I send you my resume? Even though that's fine, you do, and they probably know you do, but you got to soften it up. And you want to you want to connect with people, as Fred was saying, and you want to try to get an opportunity just to speak with them. You know, would you have 5 minutes to tell me a bit about your company, about your career, how you got to where you were? People love to talk about themselves. And you know, be your own recruiter. You know, it's easy to just send your resume to all these, Indeed or LinkedIn job postings, but are you following up? Are you applying to the job and then going on LinkedIn and seeing, okay, who are the people in this division that you're applying to? Can you send, 20 of them a note saying, hey, I'd love to learn more about your company. I'd love to learn more about your job, your background. And then you start warming things up, and then you speak to 3 of those people or 1 of those people, and you end up going in for an interview. It's like, oh, hey, yeah, I spoke to Deanna. She told me it's a great shop. Like, told me about what you guys do, your social interests. And it's a much warmer interview and conversation. You've already got some information. You already made a connection with someone there. So you gotta feel comfortable putting yourself out there. Some people are more comfortable with sales and networking than others, and it's okay if you're not. But a lot of people aren't, you just gotta try to connect with people and put yourself out there to try and connect with people and learn from everything. Like as Fred was saying, the research on the companies, looking at the competitors, looking at one company may call it client servicing, another company may call it relationship management, another company may call it account management, and understanding the different vernacular at the different companies, learning about these companies, and not just because you want to get the job, but it's cool to learn. It's useful. The more information you have in your head, as Fred was saying, the more comfortable you are in the interviews, and you store that. It's useful to you in the long term. And you may not know, what, this isn't the right job, this isn't the right company, but 5 years from where it was, from where you are now, they could be a client. You may not be working there, but you have information on them. Someone brings them up. Take everything again as a learning opportunity, and finding out about people, finding out about companies, and be thirsty for that knowledge.
So John and I do this once a year, and I was looking at some of the future slides and some of the stuff we're covering more than once. So let me just make a couple of points on this one. One of the things about LinkedIn, which I want to make sure everybody understands, LinkedIn is not Facebook. LinkedIn is not Instagram. LinkedIn is definitely not Snapchat. So LinkedIn is for professional networking and relationships, right? So in some worlds, in the social spheres of acceptance, being a connected person on Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat means you have some sort of personal relationship or friendship with that person. It's not the case with LinkedIn. LinkedIn is more of a professional networking environment. What that means is the people that you're related to through LinkedIn could be people that you may not have met before, or that you know through other people. The way that you figure out who those people are is by looking at your second and third degree connections. People who know you. And when you're looking for those types of jobs that are in fields or areas that are interesting to you, the best thing you could possibly do is connect with people that are in that field. And if you already have a connection and say, hey, Fred, you're already connected to Joe Smith, and Joe Smith's in the insurance industry, and I'm interviewing for a job at his company. Do you think you could do me a favor and either make an introduction for me, or can I use your name in connecting with him on LinkedIn? Now, I'm using myself as an example because I'm more than willing to do that. I think most people that are looking to try to help out people looking for roles would be willing to do something like that. That's a best practice for LinkedIn networking that you got to keep in the back of your mind, okay? So first connections are people that you're connected to directly. Second and third connections are people just like second and third, cousins, right? People that aren't directly your cousins, but they're second cousins. They're close, but not that close. Those are the types of things that you have to be able to do in order to expand your chances of finding your foot in that door, okay? I will say, and I've said this to almost every one of these groups that I've done in the past, the fact that you showed up today is a very positive step. Now, usually we're sitting in a conference room in the New York City area with a bunch of people there talking about their careers and networking, and we have people coming in doing mock interviews. Obviously, we're at a different point in time today because of what's going on in the world. But the fact that you come to something like this, you're networking, you're making connections with people, that's an important part of what you should be doing when you're looking for a job. The things to look for, we mentioned some of this already, and I don't want to like go too far into things we've already covered. These are the things that you can find on Glassdoor or LinkedIn, how old the organization is, the products and services it offers, any indication of how they've done both in the past or in the future. Are they growing? Have they just laid off 500 people? Like, what's going on in the news? It's an important component of what you should be looking for. The locations of where the jobs are, and then making sure that they're a fit for you. Is there a parent organization? Is there a subsidy that's affiliated with it? Just knowing as much as you can about the company would be helpful. The most important thing for me when somebody's coming in for an interview is somebody understanding why they're there. And I think that that sounds like a kind of silly statement to make, but you have no idea how many times people walk in for interviews and they really can't articulate why they're there. Why do you want this job? Why is it interesting to you? Why is this something that you feel like you would be good at, right? And I think you need to be able to figure out a way through all the tips we just gave you to have enough of a story as to why you think that this job is for you. And interviews are meant to be shows. You're showing your best self. You're not always going to be the way you are in an interview. You're likely not going to be as nervous. You're likely not going to be as polished. And you have to, in some ways, present yourself in the best possible way. If you go to the next slide, which I think John's going to cover, that's how you get into marketing yourself professionally. John, if you want to cover this, talk about it.
So I remember I made this slide a couple of years ago. It's funny, I haven't seen it in a bit, but be a chameleon.
Pictures of S.T.A.R.
Market yourself differently for different opportunities. As I was saying before, if you're applying for a sales role, but they call it business development, use the words business development in your interview, in your resume. You've got to help people make the connections, right? And you got to make it clear. And you've got to sell yourself, as Fred was saying. It's easier for some than others, but one of the things I used to tell people, like when you go and interview, as Fred was saying, know why you're there. And I almost like to say, make it sound like when you're interviewing for a job that this is the job you wanted to do since you were 2 years old. This is the job you want to die doing. And that's not the case. And I'm not saying misrepresent, but it's a sales game. It's a marketing game. And you've got to sell yourself on that role. And so it's not necessarily the right time for diplomacy or wavering. You're selling. You're trying to sell yourself. You're the product. You're in an interview, and you want to show them that this is what you want to do, and then you want to ask questions about the actual job, right? It's great to know about the company and everything, but your questions shouldn't necessarily be in the interview, especially the first couple rounds, asking about the business strategy of the company and, the direction the CEO is taking it. That's all good stuff. I'm sure you're curious. It's something to understand down the road, but what's the job you're applying for? What's the job you're interviewing for? Asking questions around that role and what it means to be successful in that role, and, how that role works on a day-to-day basis. Because if you don't, it's easy to look at a job description and say, okay, well, it says you got to do this, this, and that. And, but what does that mean to them? Because it could mean something to one company, but someone else has it listed and it means something differently to them. So understanding and asking questions around what that specific, job role and responsibilities are going to be. And then the more you understand that and the more better questions you have and the more poignant they are about the specific job and where they need help and how you can help, then you're able to sell yourself better, because you're able to say, okay, here's a blueprint. This is what they're looking for the job. This is what they're looking for in the role. Here are, you know, if you don't necessarily have the credentials, here are my abilities. You know, here are things I've done, you know, even if it, you know, was working at a summer camp or something, you're dealing with relationship management, you're managing groups of kids, and don't be afraid to, don't sell yourself short. Don't be, you know, think about what they need and feel comfortable selling yourself with those skill sets that they're looking for, and finding examples. You know, just because you don't have 2 to 3 years of experience in that job doesn't mean you can't do the job. You know, you can probably do a lot of the jobs you're going to be pulled into an interview for, or else they probably wouldn't be calling you in for the interview. So feel confident, feel good about that. Know that there's a reason they're bringing you in, and feel comfortable selling yourself and doing what you can to demonstrate your abilities, and doing it all in a humble and respectful manner as well.
Yep. So just going to run through some things that should, you know, some of the stuff we've covered, some of this we haven't, but things to find out ahead of time, making sure that you understand what the salary range is, if there is one established for the job, making sure that you understand the job description, the duties that are involved, what the responsibilities are, that they're clear to you, you know what they are before you go in. You should definitely know the interviewer's name, their title, how to pronounce their name, what their position is. So usually you could ask those questions very politely in an email. And I do think that, you know, what I would say is, from the standpoint of, you should know going in what you want to know about the job. Have a list prepared of questions. Some people bring in a list, which is fine. If you just want to have in your head that you know mentally there's 3 things you want to know. Those are things that you could do and take care of ahead of time to help you with your nerves. If you go to the next slide, your resume is your ticket. You want to highlight the things that are most important about the job that you're interested in and about who you are, all on the same piece of paper. I generally go by the rule that there should not be more than 1 piece of paper for every 10 years of work. At times I've expanded that to 15. I just think that in some cases, most recruiters don't get past the first page regardless of who you are. So figure out a way to get yourself explained in a way that's easy and digestible for people who don't have a lot of time to be going through resumes. You want to make sure that your career interests and your resume reflect what you want to highlight in your interview. So whether it's because you're energetic, you're a go-getter, you're a self-starter, the way that you want to describe yourself, both from the strengths and accomplishment standpoint, are things that you definitely want to be able to sell, especially if you're in the job market for the first time, or you're in college and you're looking for your first role. When you're talking about, I know that one question came in about gaps. Here's what I would say about gaps. Life happens, things change, and there are times where you're not going to be working. And the one thing that I would say as an HR person that people make the mistake of is that they don't clearly articulate what their gaps are. I'm not saying write down, I took care of my kids from 2015 to 2020, but writing, somebody, a comment, or looking for a comment that says out of the workforce, stayed at home, family caretaker, that's all fine. The thing that's not okay is having a gap in your resume that has no explanation as to why it happened. Now, I can make assumptions as to why you may have been out of the workforce for a period of time, but there's no reason really why I would have to assume that if you put it on there. And it's completely fine because it happens. Life happens. So LinkedIn profiles, I put this in here as a joke, but to be honest with you, if you look at most LinkedIn profile pictures, it is with the one with your hand around your significant other at the latest happy hour. Usually you've figured out that you're supposed to crop out the drink, especially if you're in the 21. But you want to make sure that it's a representation of who you are. To go back to what I said before, this is not Facebook, this is not Instagram, this is not Snapchat. I know I say Facebook like people still use it, but I'm in my 40s and we still use Facebook. I'm sure most people don't, but you want to make sure your picture is professional. You want to make sure that it represents you as a professional worker, and that it matches what your career interests are. If you're interested in the art world, you don't have to wear a suit. If you're interested in the business and finance world, you probably should. Right? So you got to make sure it matches what you're doing. And then on top of that, it has to match your resume. And I put a comment in here, if you don't have a LinkedIn profile, you need one. I'll tell you why. 9 out of 10 times when we're going to interview candidates today, we don't even look at the resume anymore. We're looking at the LinkedIn profile. LinkedIn has figured out a way to navigate itself into every nook and cranny of the recruiting game. And by the way, more the power to them. They do a great job with it. But if you don't have one, you have to have one. And if you don't have a picture, it usually is not the best thing to not have one, right? And it's not because people are nosy, but it's because people do feel like they want to make some sort of level of connectivity to you. So make sure that you have your resume updated, that it matches your LinkedIn profile, and that your LinkedIn profile has a picture on it that's professional looking. There you go to the next slide. The day before the interview, I know that this is kind of my old school thinking of how things are supposed to work, but the truth is, if you've got an interview, you got to treat it seriously. Make sure that you know what you're going to wear. Make sure you lay it out the night before. Make sure you're not scrambling. I interviewed for the job to run HR for Tradeweb 5 years ago. I took it seriously. I put my clothes out the night before. I made sure that everything was coordinated and that I wasn't running around. The last thing you need is more reasons to be nervous before you're going in for an interview. If you're waking up and you're going for an interview or you're going later in the day, knowing that that box is ticked is an important component of you making sure that you're mentally prepared for the next step, okay? Have all your materials organized and ready to go. What is a material? You should have a copy of your resume. You probably should have 5 copies of your resume, okay? You should have a professional looking portfolio with you, especially if you're going to interview in a financial services type organization. If you're interviewing in a place that's less formal than that, that's fine. I still would bring your resume. The reason is that most people want to know that you're prepared. And if you want to indicate that you're somebody who's prepared, the best way to do it is to be prepared, okay? I'm a stickler for being on time. That's just me. I always suggest that you arrive to the building that you're interviewing or to the location that you're interviewing at least an hour before if possible. I know if you're interviewing during the day and you're working someplace else, that might not always be possible. But what do you want to avoid? You want to avoid being in a situation where you're running around, you can't find where you're supposed to go, you don't know where the building is, you didn't know that security usually has a line of 7 people out the door. You want to make sure that you're knocking all of those factors out the day before if possible. So when you're scheduling your time, you're making sure you're prepared, you got to know in advance that life happens, things happen, things change, and you don't want to be late. So prepare yourself to be early, sit in the coffee shop around the corner to wait before you go in, and make sure that when you go in, you get there 5 to 10 minutes early and you're in the waiting room. Sometimes people with security today, you need a little more time than that. Just be prepared for it before you get to that point. The next slide I entered in literally 2 days ago, mostly because this is the new normal for all of us. What to do now that we have virtual interviews everywhere. Look, there's no exact science to this thing. We've run programs at Tradeweb in the last couple of weeks about everything you could possibly imagine that could happen on a video conference call is going to happen. People obviously understand that your home life and your work life is now infringing on each other. right? So make sure you try to do what you can to be, again, prepared beforehand. If it's Zoom, if it's FaceTime, whatever it is, make sure you test it out. Test it with a friend or a family member. You guys all did a remarkable job of dialing in today, so you've all figured the Zoom thing out by now, which is fantastic. Set yourself up in a quiet place if you can. Make sure that you handle your location with care. It doesn't mean that it has to be perfect. It doesn't mean that we're eyeballing where you're living and what you're doing and what's going on behind you. But make sure that you're trying to set yourself up in a quiet place. Everybody gets the barking dog, the meowing cat, the screaming baby, the doorbell ringing. Who is that? I can't believe somebody's coming to the door. It's okay. It's probably going to happen, right? But don't let it throw you off your game. People on the other side have the same thing probably happening to them, the interviewer. I know I do in the last couple of weeks. Do the best you can to be prepared. Dress your best. You don't necessarily have to overdo it, but you don't have to underdo it either. Just that our chairman of Tuesday's Children, John Cahalan, and I were just talking. He had 2 interviews today. One guy dressed up in his best possible suit and tie. The other guy dressed probably what I would say is not appropriate for an interview. I don't think he thought either one of those was right, to be honest with you. I think the answer was probably somewhere in the middle, maybe something a little better than what John and I are wearing today, right? But the truth is, if you don't know, ask. Recruiters are going to help you. They're going to advise you. They're going to tell you what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And don't take any risks, okay? There's no reason for you to be articulating or showing off a shirt with a logo on it or anything like that. That's just not necessary at this point in time. Keep things as plain as possible. One of the things I said to the Tuesday Children crew earlier today is like, it's a little awkward that it's just a few of us on the screen. I prefer to have everybody on the screen, because then everybody's looking at me, and the bad haircut I gave myself this past weekend. What do you guys think? Does it look okay? I think that, your body language is important. Recognize it's not going to be perfect. And if you are in an interview today, right, which I think is what most people are focused on, and what's different than where I was before. I don't know when we're going to be back. I don't know when the offices are going to be opened again. I'm probably not entirely sure if I can make an offer right now. Now, I'm not saying I'm representative of every company out there, but I think a lot of companies right now are struggling with knowing what the next steps are. So keep that in mind for yourself as you're going through these discussions. It is hard enough as it is. John was talking earlier about, sending out hundreds of resumes and trying to be positive, right? And making sure that you're positive. You get to an interview on the video screen, and you're trying to talk about when you can start or when the next step is or what the offer process is like. And most HR people like me are really been focused on figuring out how we can provide the best mental health support to our current employees, and then we can keep the company running in a way that we don't have to lay people off. That's what most HR people are doing right now. I'm not saying that to scare you. I'm saying that to give you a dose of reality of what's actually happening in the marketplace. And just know that you may have to be a little bit more patient than you normally would be with your job search until things hopefully return to whatever the new normal is supposed to be. We can move to the next slide. And if you guys have questions, you can send them through on the chat. We'll stop for questions at the end, but I'm going to try to roll through this next stuff pretty quickly. This is designed for people who work in offices, right? But the principles still apply. Clean clothes, it doesn't have to be expensive, okay? Clean clothes, ironed clothes, clean shoes. I don't want to smell you from 20 feet away. Professional bag with a portfolio. It's not that hard, okay? You would not believe how hard this is for some people, okay? You would not believe how many people take risks. The minute they're walking in the door, I'm like, what were you thinking? Okay? There is no reason to take risks at this point. If you got an interview, you don't want to be in a position where people are evaluating for you for things other than your ability and what comes out of your mouth. Okay. Next page. We talked about extra resumes. We talked about knowing what your 3 to 5 key strengths are, your list of questions, your portfolio, so we don't have to spend any more time on that. One of the things you have to be a little prepared for is there's different types of interviewing techniques that get used. One of them is behavior-based interviewing. And basically, this is a process where the interviewer is trying to get a detailed description of what you're going to respond by taking you off your game from your canned answers. Okay? So what does that mean? If you go to the next slide. Basically, when you're doing BBI as a recruiter, this is an insider tip, right? You're trying to ask them, the candidate, to recall in detail what you did, thought, and felt in a key situation as if you were reliving them, okay? The reason why you use something like this as a tactic is that it takes you off your game in knowing the answers to the questions that we already prepared for that we talked about earlier in the presentation, okay? How do you handle that? If you go to the next slide. You're going to be asked to give detailed, focused descriptions and examples of things that you did or how you handled things in a prior situation. My advice to you is, before you go into any interview, you should have some ideas of things that you can point back to in your career that taught you how to learn a specific part of who you are. Whether it be, I worked in the ice cream parlor and I realized that the line was getting long and I didn't focus on making sure that I was doing the best job with quality, and the people who were getting the ice cream weren't happy about it because I was giving them the wrong flavor. And what I realized is I should have talked to the manager, asked for more support, or maybe found a way to concentrate more before I moved on to the next person so I didn't mess that up, right? I just made that example up out of nowhere. I'm not sure it makes any sense, but try to have some sort of explanation for how you went through the process of deciding how you made a decision, okay? That's what BBI is. If you go to the next slide. The S.T.A.R method basically, as part of the BBI process, walks you through an actual situation, right? You don't want to be in a situation, if you go to the next slide, it'll give you some commonly asked questions, which will probably help me with this, more so than me trying to think through it on my own. What's the most complex assignment you've ever had? What was your role? Tell me about the suggestion you made to improve the way a job process or an operation worked. What was the result? What are 3 qualities of leadership that you think are important? How have you demonstrated these? And when you give the answers, the purpose from the recruiter's perspective is to follow up and keep asking you more and more questions so that they can learn about how you handled yourself in that situation. In those circumstances, the best thing you could do is understand one thing. In BBI interviewing, there's no right answer. The answer is your answer. And they're trying to understand what your thought process was through the answer and making sure that you understand exactly how and what you did and why you did it. And for you, as a prospective candidate, don't be so focused on making sure that you know exactly what you're going to say. Focus on making sure that your thought process makes sense, okay? So as a prospective hire, right, the most complex assignment you've ever had, what was your role? Well, the most complicated assignment I ever had is I had to organize all the resumes I received for an open job and then decide who the best candidate was for a role in the position. What was your role in that? Well, my role was making a judgment about the best qualified people for a job. Well, how did you do that? Well, I did that by looking to see if the qualifications of the candidates met the qualifications in the job description of the job that I was recruiting for. Well, what made you think that you knew the difference between the people who were good and not good? Well, I've had prior experience in doing this and I've done it for a long time. And I know that if I find people that have skills that are in blah, 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 they're better qualified than other people who don't have those skills. What happened? I hired the best person for the job, or at least I thought it was. I didn't hire the right person. Well, why didn't you hire the right person? Well, I didn't realize that they had this, this, and this wasn't going the way I expected, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter what's coming out of my mouth in the explanation. What matters is that there's an explanation behind what I'm doing and why I decided to do something. And that's an important part of what you're doing for any types of behavioral-based interviewing process, okay? Stages of the interview. Generally speaking, these usually don't last more than an hour. The introductory stage, which is 2 to 5 minutes. We're going to go through each one of these with a slide for each. So let's just go to the next page, Deanna. Shaking hands. Shaking hands. That's so February 2020. Is anybody going to be shaking hands anymore? You know, I didn't even consider the fact that that was on this slide. I would say you take the lead of the person that you're going to meet going forward. You might be doing the elbow bump as opposed to shaking hands in this new day and age. Looks like somebody's having lag on here. Is anybody else having lag besides Rishi? No? Rishi, it looks like it's just you. Using the interviewer's name, knowing, you know, hi Fred, nice to meet you. Making sure that your interviewer has your resume, and of course, if they don't, you have 5 copies. Making sure you're smiling, making sure you have enthusiasm. Those are all important parts of the introductory stage of the interview. Next slide. At this point, they're looking for information about your background. Tell me about yourself. When you're asked the question, tell me about yourself, you got to be a little careful and aware of the question that's being asked of you. They're not asking about, well, you know, I live on Long Island, I have a wife, a couple of kids, have a dog. They're asking about your goals, your objectives, your experience, the things that you want to be able to say represent who you are. If you're asked specific questions about your background, you want to make sure you're not giving yes and no answers, that you're being concise, but you're also being complete, and making sure you're taking advantage of describing the past performances that you've had in a way that represents you in your best possible light. On the next slide, we have some common interview questions. Tell me a little bit about yourself, why you're interested in working for this organization. I don't have to go through these one by one. I think we give these slides out to everybody afterwards. Yes, we do. So you don't have to worry about scurrying through and writing all this stuff down. You'll be able to get copies of all these questions at a later date. The information about the organization. These are places where you, as a prospective candidate, can ask things about the job that are important to you. What has been done in this role before that you'd like to see improved? What are the challenges that the person in this position is facing? Is there room for professional growth and upward mobility, which is an important part of some jobs, not for all, but for a lot of people, that's an important thing. How are you going to be evaluated? Is there a year-end review process? Is there a mid-year review process? All those things are very important. And then the last part of it is knowing a little bit about the environment and the culture as well. Which is an important component of knowing whether you as a person are going to fit into the culture. Does it fit your style? Does it fit how you are? And I have written here, prepare 3 thought-provoking questions. One of them can be about culture. The next slide gives you some more questions to ask. How do you like working for the company? Are there any new projects or jobs? How are they determined or evaluated? Tell me about your background and how working at this company has helped satisfy your career desires. It's an important thing that John brought up before. People love talking about themselves. They love talking about their background, their experience, who they are, what they did. All those things are things that you could use as a benefit for yourself to get them talking about themselves, but also for you to learn and listen to what they're saying to you and how you could use that for the future. At the end of the interview, you can probably tell at that point that the interviewer is ready to sum up. You want to say thank you. You want to know what the next steps are. You want to have an enthusiastic summary of what you think are the reasons why you think you're the best person for the job. Siri seems to think that I keep talking to her, and I have to keep turning Siri off. I'm not sure what I said to make her think that that was something she'd be responding to. But now that I said her name, she's going to respond again. I'm very big on thank you letters, okay? Whether it's a handwritten note or an email, just make sure whatever you do, I think most cases email is more expedient these days. You would have no idea how many people send thank you emails with typos, spelling my name wrong, calling me Frank. I'm definitely not Frank. I'm sure John gets it with the J-O-H-N. It's definitely J-O-N. So paying attention to those details is important, especially you have a free opportunity to showcase yourself. You got to take it as seriously as you possibly can. 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses, 3 reasons why an employer should hire you, and 3 reasons why you want the job. If you can walk in your preparation knowing the answer to these 3 and having these locked down, you're going to be in a much better place than if you didn't have that information before. So these things are pretty easy to get for yourself if you've thought about them before you walk in the door. So one thing I just want to focus on that we haven't talked about yet in this slide is weaknesses. Everybody feels like that's a trick question, right? Well, how do you describe a weakness, right? Weaknesses are things that you could describe very easily as things that you're working on and you're trying to improve, okay? The most common one we get is, well, I'm a little too organized. I'm sure that's a weakness, but okay. I'm a little too detail-oriented, and sometimes I'm slower than I should be because I want to make sure I get things right. Not sure that's a weakness, but I would accept those things as things to say, okay, they put some thought into things that they need to work on, right? But if you're applying for the customer relations role and you want to say, I'm kind of quiet, I don't like talking to people, right? Not exactly the best thing to be saying in terms of a weakness for yourself. So make sure if you're applying for a job that requires a lot of diligence and a lot of detail orientation, that you don't say that one of your problems is you rush through things too quickly and you don't do things the right way. Okay. This is the final checklist before we go to Q&A. And I don't know if we want to cover this all over again, but if anybody has any questions for us, we can kind of take a pause for a minute and look through the questions that have come in already. Is it okay to call HR and find out why one didn't get the job? Yes, you can call and ask. I'm not always sure you're going to get an honest answer. Most times they'll tell you that they selected somebody who's better qualified. It's better to ask, what is it that I can do differently next time to be a better candidate for a job than to ask why you didn't get it. The reason why is because for most people, from an employment perspective, we're kind of remiss to give out direct, honest feedback to people who interview for jobs, mostly because of employment legal reasons, right? We don't want to engage in a dialogue with prospective candidates about why they did or didn't get it. If you called and said, hey, can you tell me what I need to do differently next time? Say, well, the candidate that was hired had more experience in the particular field, or to be honest, some of the other candidates had a better understanding of the role than you did. Some of the candidates had better examples to explain why they're a better fit for the job. It puts less of a confrontation in that question. If you don't know what the salary range is it ever okay to ask the salary range on an interview? Of course, you should ask. You should always know what the job pays and ask for that information through the process. They might not tell you. If that's something that they don't tell you, fine. But you're going to have to know that information when you get through the job hiring process, obviously, because they're going to have to hire you. It really depends in that particular instance is what stage you're at in your life in terms of how important that is for you. The one thing for those of you in New York and New Jersey, you are no longer allowed as an employer to ask what your compensation was at your last job. It is now illegal to ask that question. So if they can't ask you what you made at your last job, they can ask you what your expectations are. And that's an important point to consider, because if you give an expectation that's not meshing with what the goal of the job is or the range for the job, you can be knocking yourself out for the job. So you have to ask yourself, how important is that range to you? If your range really is, well, I got to make, $90,000 a year to make this work, you could say that, but make sure that if the job pays 80 and you get disqualified, you don't wonder why. Especially if you would take the job at 80, right? So just be aware of the fact that that's something that's a little bit of a catch-22 in these processes. When you discuss gaps, where do you document the reason you have an 8-year gap to raise children? Very simply, exactly where it belongs. If you worked from 2003 to 2011 and then took off from 2011 to 2015, just write 2011 to 2015, caretaker. That's it. That's all you have to do. Should you always ask a question, even if they already addressed all the questions, or is it okay to say not at this time? John, what do you think about that?
I think there should always be questions. There's always, you clearly don't know everything about everything. And if they covered some of your, the list of the 5 questions you came in with, they should have talked about something in the interview that you didn't know before, that, maybe you could be looking for more color on, or, just understanding better. And then also asking, always asking them, like, is there anything in my background that, I can give you more detail on? I think that's something that should be kind of done towards the end, before it's over anyways, because you want to make sure when you're walking out of there, you're not just looking for the first opportunity for, like, okay, like, I think it's over, like, I can get out of here. I didn't screw the pooch, so let me run out of here. It's, you really want to be thoughtful and take advantage of this opportunity at every minute they're willing to give you, and obviously be respectful of their time. But it's always an opportunity for you to also, learn about them, but also tell them more about yourself.
Yeah, I would just say, John, to your point, like, if you have a question, great, but if you don't make one up that doesn't make any sense. And if it's already been answered, don't ask it, right? So if you say, hey, listen, I was going to ask you about how many people were at the company or what the culture was like, and you did such a great job explaining it already, I don't really want to ask it, that's completely fine. Completely fine. One of the questions that came in was about email versus thank you notes. I love personal thank you notes, right? Like handwritten. I do think that in today's day and age, email is definitely faster. And in some cases where decisions are made pretty quickly, you're better off sending it the night of your interview so that you know that the person already got it. That's just my opinion. Second interviews or third interviews or fourth interviews, I think you got to stick to the same basic premise. One of the things you need to focus on, who are you interviewing with the second time around and why? Is the first time around the recruiter, the second time around the hiring manager? Is the hiring manager the person making the decision? You might not know the answer to that question. But your level of understanding of how that flow works is important for you as a prospective candidate. My opinion is you should ask those questions of the recruiter that you're working with and make sure you have those answers as you go along in the process. They're more than willing to answer questions for you. They might not be the best at describing things to you up front because they do this all day long. So make sure you take care of yourself by asking things in advance.
Should you take notes during an interview? I personally would not recommend it, at least for the type of stuff that I'm, usually interviewing for. But I think if it is something that you think is helpful or beneficial to the interview process and the role, ask.
Yeah, I don't care as long as it doesn't distract you, right?
Right.
If you can do it and still, if you could do it and still continue in the conversation, right? Fine. But if you're doing it and I'm waiting for you to write down my answers to get to the answering the next question, not the best thing. So just be mindful if you're going to do that, that you're doing it in a way that doesn't take away from the flow of the interview. GPA requirements, my general rule, and again, maybe I'm old school on this, if you have over a 3.0, you put it on your resume. If you don't, you don't. And you don't ask that question. You don't highlight that. When you're going through the process, if you've been working more than 10 years, you don't need a GPA on your resume. If you put on that you got, oh, that's a really good shot of me there. If you put on that you got a 3.7 in economics, but you don't put your overall GPA because it's a 2.7, don't put it. Because that's an easy trick to figure out that you didn't put it for a reason, right? I think that most major banks today, for the top jobs in investment banking and sales and trading, and some of the top firms in the hedge fund world, are still obviously extraordinarily focused on your overall GPA. If you don't meet them, there's a good chance that you're never going to get around it. Not putting it on your resume is not an answer. It's never going to work. So make sure you put your resume on, you deal with the consequences. Put your GPA on your resume, you deal with the consequences. If you really feel like you're a qualified candidate beyond that, try to make a connection to somebody in the firm who will get you a look, because otherwise it's going to be hard to get past it. So somebody here wrote that they've been haven't been working since 2012. Do you recommend I start trying to apply for lower level jobs to get back in the field and do volunteer work? Yes. If you haven't worked, volunteer work helps because it's a great resume filler without a doubt. Lower level jobs, it depends upon what you mean by lower level jobs. My opinion is that if you're looking to get back in the workforce, even if it's for a 1-year gig, doing something that gets you experience to doing something that you can put on your resume is better than nothing. So generally speaking, I would say that's something that I would definitely try to do if you can afford to do it. I don't think that there's anything quote unquote beneath anybody. So like, I think that if you're in the position that you're in and you're looking to find a way to get back on track, either the volunteer work or the more junior level job than you would normally be applying for is fine for me. John, next question was for you.
Yeah, I see. Okay, so someone's asking that they see that I've changed industries a few times, and advice I'd give to someone who's making a look in an industry change. I think it's a common thing. I think every job that I interviewed for or applied for, even if I wasn't necessarily doing that actual role previously, and was a different industry, sector, vertical, whatever, I think I was qualified for. And so I think it's about, when you're making this transition and when you're looking to jump into a different type of role or different type of industry, that, it is something that makes sense and it is something you can do and be excited about. Is no matter what you're doing, if you have work experience, you've got relatable skills and abilities and experience that, applies to different jobs and functions. So feel confident about that and, hone in on what you have done that makes you a good fit for this other industry and this other company, or, whatever it may be, because, they may not notice it. They may not know it either. And then you kind of tell them, well, okay, you know what, this experience I had in, recruiting and, recruiting for financial services and being a headhunter, you know, is now going to make me a good insurance broker because I've got, you know, I'm used to talking to people every day. I'm used to going on a lot of meetings, and I've also got, you know, contacts with all these different companies and businesses that now I can go and sell insurance to. So I never sold insurance before, but, you know, I hit the ground running because, you know, I had sales experience, I had relationship management experience, and I, you know, had contacts that were relevant and work that was relevant to where I was going, you know, and what I had been doing.
There was another question here about Indeed. Indeed's a great site. I mean, basically, it's a job aggregator, right? So, like, Indeed as a company has tried to figure out a way to navigate, get the most amount of job postings possible, and we get us to pay for the advertising to put them out there, which is great. It's what they should be doing if they're that kind of business. I think they're as good as anybody else. You can apply through jobs through any medium possible. Somebody asked if you know a senior person, should you mention it at a company that you're interviewing for? I think it could help. It can't be done awkwardly, like, you know, oh, you know, I know Jane Smith and she's the head of this business. You can drop it in, and if you can drop it in a way that's not off-putting, I think that's fine. But I think to answer the last two questions, senior person at the company, absolutely, you can mention it. And I would definitely use Indeed if that's the place that you're finding jobs. I mean, part of the problem, everybody, is Indeed's kind of an aggregator of everybody. So to get attention there is going to be harder. You're better off applying through LinkedIn and using connections that you know, in my opinion.
Graduates and having a minor, I mean,
it has to relate, right? It has to relate to the job that you're applying for. If your minor is relevant to the job, fine. If it doesn't matter much, in my opinion.
yeah, and also don't get too bogged down in, you know, if your major doesn't necessarily apply to, I think, your industry too. Obviously, it's helpful. You're definitely going to get more looks and have more opportunities if there is, you know, if you studied, you know, in school the type of work that you're looking to apply to, but it doesn't, you know, good example is the valedictorian in the business school that I went to college with at Boston College, is now, you know, teaching scuba diving in Florida. And my buddy at Boston College, who was a sociology major, is on, you know, Bloomberg and MSNBC every week being interviewed about the financial markets and everything. And so it's not the end all be all. And, you know, the different experience applies to, you know, work. So, you know, obviously degrees are good, and it's good to be, you know, have it, education and what you're looking for, but don't think just because you don't have the degree that you can't pursue a certain industry.
You can. The question is, what if you don't have the detailed experience that they're looking for? You could definitely say what you would do, especially if you're coming out of school. It would be important to say what relevant experiences you have, even if it's not the detailed experience that they're looking for. For the most part, if they're interviewing you for a role where you're looking for specific experiences, if you don't have that experience, you're not going to get the job, right? If they're really requiring you to have an expertise in Microsoft Excel pivot tables, and you don't have any experience in Microsoft Excel pivot tables, well, then you shouldn't be getting the job and you shouldn't be interviewing for it, right? If there are things that are more relatable, like, well, they're looking for somebody that has detailed experience of supporting and dealing with difficult customers, use a prior experience that you have in your life where you've dealt with difficult people. It doesn't have to be in the customer context. It could be in your life, in your family, or anything that you've been through. Can you recommend any employers that have training programs for older people with different work experience from another career? There's plenty of companies out there right now that are focused on re-entry programs, which I think is what you're talking about. At Morgan Stanley, I actually started one for people who took 15 to 20 years off to raise their children and come back to work. So I don't know of specific companies off the top of my head, but if you Google re-entry programs, that's probably the best place to find them. There are companies that do it. I would say generally speaking, it's a very defined few, and probably most in the New York City area that I know about. It's not the easiest thing in the world to find in terms of companies that do those programs. They exist, they're just hard to find. I think this year is going to be tough. The question is this year going to be tough, 2020? I do think that despite the fact that it's going to be tough, it can't take you off your game, because when things do get back to somewhat normal, there's going to be more jobs available than people willing to take them, right? This amount of displacement in the employment market is going to provide opportunities for people. So those opportunities might not be till later this year than we may have expected, especially if you're expecting to find something in the beginning of this year. But I just think my recommendation to everybody is be diligent, focus on making sure that you're taking advantage of resources available to you. And I guess I'll just close with this from my perspective. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. I know John offered the same thing. Reach out. We're volunteers trying to help out the folks that are affiliated with Tuesday's Children with this program. I would say, generally speaking, we get 25 to 30 people in one of these programs every year that we do it, every time that we do it. I make that offer every time. I'd say maybe 4 or 5 of you will actually take me up on it. I'm not sure why, but just make sure that you're taking advantage of the connections and the relationships and the people who are trying to help you through the Career Resource Center at Tuesday's Children, because we do try to do the best we can to help you guys through navigating your career. Okay. John, you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah. You know, to Fred's point, staying diligent. It's really easy to get out of whack in this situation environment we're in right now. There really is a lot of opportunity to learn new things, learn new skills, whether that's, you know, teaching yourself to play guitar or learning how to do pivot tables on Microsoft Excel. Use this time, you know, make the most of it. Obviously take care of yourself. You got to stay sane. You got to stay healthy. So exercise, you know, do what you can to keep the wheels turning, to keep, you know, the blood flowing. So when things do come live again, you're ready to capitalize. And, you know, it's not, speaking to humans is not something that you haven't done in a long time. And you've been challenging yourself in one way or another, not just watching Tiger King on Netflix or whatever it is. Although you need to decompress too. And so definitely do whatever, you know, does make you happy to do that. But take advantage of it. As Fred was saying, connect with us. I know that I've spoken to a number of you, even just the past week, about, you know, mentoring and me helping mentor, and I'm happy to do that with many of you. I'm already made a number of introductions this week to people that are on the call, with people in different industries that I'm close with, that you know, are going to be helpful for networking, hopefully job opportunities, and just educating you. Now, take advantage of the resources of Tuesday's Children, and anyone and anywhere that is, you know, willing to help. Be kind to each other, take care of your families, take care of yourselves, and hope to see you soon.